Hey folks, and welcome back, and in today's video we'll be looking into how we can do passwordless authentication using FIDO2 standards. Now this FIDO2 standard consists of WebAuthn and client-to authenticator protocol. So now what we would be doing is we would be setting up Keycloak to work with this passwordless authentication mechanism, and we are going to do this passwordless authentication mechanism by authenticating using our fingerprint on our laptop, and then also set this up on our phone using the fingerprint on my phone itself. So with this, let's get started. Before we actually start looking into the setup for Keycloak, let's understand actually how this authentication works. So this is a registration process that I have put it out into a flow diagram wherein we have the client which initiates the registration. The server then responds with a particular challenge code. Now, what the browser does is it invokes this WebAuthn API with the challenge. Now the WebAuthn API finds the available authenticators. It then shows it to the user. Then the user selects this particular authenticator which he wants, like it could be from the laptop or it could be a phone. And then after that, it generates a public and private key pair. It uses the private key, signs that particular challenge which was being sent here, and then stores the private key on the device itself. It then finally sends that public key and the signature which was generated as a part of signing here and sends it to the server. Now what the server does is it validates the signature using the public key and then stores the public key against that particular registration. And then it completes the particular registration. Now this is the registration flow for actually generating this passwordless authentication. Now actually let's look into how the authentication happens. So I have this yet another flow diagram here. So in this flow diagram, what the client does is first it initiates a login. The server first sends the challenge to the client. Now what the browser does, it invokes this with the WebAuthn API. Now the WebAuthn API prompts the authenticator. The user authenticates using the authenticator. Now this could be using from the Mac, the fingerprint, or from your phone, a fingerprint or a PIN. And then afterwards, the WebAuthn then gets access to the private key. And using the private key, it then signs that particular challenge and sends the signature back to the server. Now what the server does is it actually validates that incoming signature with the public key that it had stored during the registration. And in this way, it figures out if the login is successful or not. With this understanding, now actually let's go and set this up in our Keycloak instance. So for this, I have a Docker image here. So let me open this. And if you see here, I'm using the Keycloak version 18 here, and it has default admin passwords here. And I'm going to expose this at 8080 port. So with this, let's actually start Keycloak. Docker compose up. Okay, so with this, Keycloak has started now. Let's actually access it. So localhost 8080. And let's actually log into the admin console. So here I'm going to specify admin. So first thing what we're going to do is we're going to create a new realm. So here I'm going to specify FIDO2 and I'm going to create this. So with the realm now created, what we are going to do is we are going to change the authentication flow. So let's go to authentication, and here if you see in the flows here, you see this browser flow, right? What we are going to do now is we are going to make a copy of this particular browser flow. So I'm going to click here the option copy, and I'm going to call this as FIDO flow and say okay. Now this will actually create a copy of the browser flow. So here what we are going to do, we are going to actually delete this FIDO flow form here. So we're going to go to this actions and say delete. And now what we're going to do, we are going to actually add a new flow. So we're going to say new flow, and we're going to give this as FIDO authentication. And the flow type is going to be generic. So when I say save, if you see here, now FIDO authentication has been added, and I'm going to mark this as required. Next, what I'm going to do is using this option here, I'm going to add a new execution. Now, when I add this new execution here, I will be selecting here WebAuthn Passwordless Authenticator. So with this, we are going to actually set up the passwordless authenticator mechanism now. So I'm going to save this now, and I'm going to mark this as required. Now, so the flow is first it checks for cookies, and then it checks for the FIDO authentication. Now for this WebAuthn Passwordless Authenticator to work, we also need to add a username field. So I'm going to add a new execution, and I'm going to specify here username form. And I'm going to say save. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to drag the username above such that the authentication flow will first show me the username and then it's going to do the passwordless authentication. With this, we actually created our authentication flow. Now what we need to do is we need to bind this particular flow. So let's go to binding, and for the browser flow, what we are going to do is we are going to change this to the FIDO flow now. We're going to save this, and then finally we have to go to this required actions in which we are going to add our WebAuthn passwordless registration here. So I'm going to say okay, and I'm going to make this as one of the default actions. So now this has completed all the authentication flow actions that you need, right? Next, what we are going to do is we are going to create a particular client. So let's go to a client here and create one new client for us. So we're going to call this as passwordless client, and we are going to give it a root URL keycloak/app. This keycloak/app is provided by keycloak.org, wherein you can test your local RLMs using this particular website. Here what I'm going to specify is I'm going to provide it my Keycloak URL, which is localhost 8080, and I'm going to specify the RLM, and I'm going to specify my client ID. So let's go first here and create our client first. And with this, we have a client here, passwordless client, and we have the root URL present here and the valid redirect URLs. With this, I'm going to save this. Next, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to this test application. Here, I'm going to specify FIDO2. This is the same RLM that we had specified here. And then I'm going to specify passwordless client here. I'm going to save this thing. Next, what we are going to do is we are going to enable user registration. So for this, let's go to the RLM settings, and in the login section, we are going to enable user registration. So here we enable it and we say save. With this, we set up the entire Keycloak with passwordless authentication ready. So now next, what we're going to do, we're going to test this. So let's click on sign in here. And now it's going to ask me for a username or an email. But since we don't have a user, we're going to register one. So let's say we have a user A with A and a Gmail account A with a username as A and password as A and a confirm password as A. With this, we are just going to register a dummy user. Now register. Now this is the main part. Now this is the place where we are going to do the security key registration. So what we are going to do, we are going to click here. Now here it is showing me the default mechanism that is available, that is the browser authentication, through which it's going to actually communicate with my machine right now. So I'm on a Mac machine right now. So that's the reason it is showing me this particular mechanism here. But you can change this also. You can have either doing it via this device, or you could do it via a different device. Now I have a mobile phone also linked to this. So that's the reason I can use it via a mobile phone. If you want to do it via mobile phone, what you have to do is first of all, use a different device and scan this particular QR code. And then your mobile will be able to do this authentication for you. Now let's go back and let's do it using this device. And I'm going to say continue now. And I'm going to use my fingerprint, right? So with this, I'm using my fingerprint to do the authentication. And here it is actually asking me for a label to specify what type of authenticator I'm using. So I'm going to say my laptop. Now we're actually done with the registration. Let's look at how we can actually log into this. So let's go back to the admin console, and first of all, go to users, view all users, and let's log out from the session first. So let's log out. Now refresh this page. And I'm going to sign in back again. Now, when I sign in back again, I'm going to add the username A, and I'm going to say sign in. And now it's going to ask me for the security key. So when I click on this, it immediately asks me for my fingerprint. And in this way, you're able to now log in without providing any kind of password. So in this way, you can enable passwordless login for a particular user. Now I showed this authentication wherein we are using my laptop itself to do the authentication, but you may want to do this using a mobile phone. So let's actually do that particular flow. So let's go back here. I'm going to log out of all sessions first, and I'm going to refresh this particular page. Now I'm going to do sign in, and I'm going to register another user. So I'm going to register this with A2, creating another dummy user here now, and say register. Now I'm going to register the security key. So I'm going to click on register, and I'm going to say try another way, and I'm going to say a different device. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to use my phone here. So now I'm going to actually scan the QR code. So I'm going to click on this, and I'm going to say allow. I have to enable Bluetooth, and it's asking me to authenticate. So with this, we actually right now were able to do the authentication using the phone itself. So now I'm going to specify this as my phone. And now let's actually try to log in. And I'm going to go to A2, go to sessions, log out, and let's try to log in using A2 again. So I'm going to say sign in A2 and sign in with security key. So now it's actually telling me that this is the device that is linked. So I will get this particular notification here and voila. So with this, we were able to right now sign in to an application using a passwordless mechanism. So we saw how we can set up this passwordless authentication on Keycloak. We set up the authenticator on my laptop using the fingerprint and then also using the fingerprint on my mobile phone. Now I keep on exploring such kind of things, so make sure you subscribe to this particular channel and give it a thumbs up for more such videos to come. Till then, take care and see you in my next one.